Recognizing House Leader of the Green Party.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm happy to rise today to speak to the Taxation Amendment Act and to follow on the comments of the member from Kamloops South Thompson, who has very passionately advocated for action on this file on vaping for a long time, and he has been an effective voice and an effective advocate, and I appreciate the work he's done. And I want to start with some of the things that were brought up by that member, and in particular, education as such an important part of the solution to vaping and the rates of vaping that we're seeing, particularly amongst youth in BC and across the country. And I think that it's almost like a perfect storm or a perfect vacuum happened, because our generation grew up as cigarettes became increasingly stigmatized, increasingly recognized for their dangerous health impacts, and we were the generation that was fully educated about the problem and the dangers of cigarette smoking, and we recognized that we didn't want to be smokers when we grew up, and the education aspect of that was very effective. And then I think too, the film that came out, I think it came out in the 1990s, but it was The Insider. And it was a film about the tobacco industry and the way in which they've operated, and the description that they had for cigarettes, which is a cigarette was a nicotine delivery system. And we now have a new nicotine delivery system on our hands. And what we don't have was any kind of preparation going into the quite sudden arrival of this new nicotine delivery system, which came packaged in neon and pink and purple and came in flavors like bubblegum and candy floss, as was indicated. And I, as a teacher, only became aware of this new nicotine delivery system in 2012, when suddenly there was a puff of smoke in my classroom, and I turned away and I turned back, and I had no idea what this smoke could have come from, or where it could have come from, or where the smell came from. And that was the first indication of what was to come as a tsunami, I would say, between 2012 and now. And the figure just indicated by the member for Kamloops South Thompson, a 74% increase in 1 year in vaping use among youth is a shocking figure. And my children are also, one is going into high school next year, one is in high school now, and it is a significant problem in all of the schools that young people have access to this nicotine delivery system without the understanding or education of the impacts of nicotine, the highly addictive nicotine, the highly addictiveness of nicotine. I remember, again, learning when I was a teenager and talking with my friends about this, that we were shocked to know that nicotine was as addictive as heroin. And of course, in our minds, conflating nicotine and heroin meant like you didn't want to touch either one of those things. And I think that we now have a generation of children and youth that have grown up without access to that kind of regular education that we had the benefit of. And we're very much seeing the result of that now. And I commend the government, the ministers, for putting together this action plan. And I agree with the member from Kamloops South Thompson that education really has to be the central piece of this, because education is how we change behaviors. It's how we get outcomes that we want to see. It's how cigarette smoking rates decreased to the rate that they had as a result of that long-standing education that had existed. I also, I think that when we are talking about this, and I appreciate the comments about health of our youth and health of our children, and I spoke about this a little bit yesterday when I was speaking to Bill 38, the Climate Accountability Act, the amendments. And I do want to bring up another significant health issue that we have facing our children today. And there was a report that's just come out in the last few days from Lancet, a highly regarded medical journal. And that report stated that children born today will face a lifetime of climate change-related health problems. And these health problems include low birth weight, neonatal death, lung problems, asthma, insect-borne diseases, and vulnerability from extreme heat as a starting point. And that, the member from Kamloops South Thompson was saying the health of children and youth is a nonpartisan issue. I couldn't agree more. And while we've seen the first vaping-related illness in BC 4 or 5 weeks ago confirmed, and within 4 weeks the government comes up with an action plan, a 10-point action plan, and we are instituting new taxation, we are bringing in education, we are taking this very seriously. And yet the greatest threat to our children's health is climate change, by a wide margin. And on that, both of the other parties agreed in the spring to a significant amount of subsidy to the LNG industry in this province, which is a contributor to climate change. And I think we need to wrestle with that. I'm asking every member in this House to wrestle with that. I so applaud the passion of the member from Kamloops South Thompson for his capacity to speak to this, both from his personal experience, from what he's heard from parents and educators, from what he sees, the risks. I think we all need to feel that same level of passion about the very serious risk that climate change poses to our children, to unborn children, to future generations of children. And I want us to take that as seriously and as passionately as we are taking this issue, which deserves the action, but I want us to wrestle. I want us to wrestle with where we're at. And I want us to recognize that, yep, educators and parents and physicians are calling on us to make these changes to ensure that youth are protected from vaping products and understand the risks that those pose. Children and youth are gathering in the thousands and tens of thousands and around the world in the millions and asking us as decision makers to take seriously the risk that climate change poses to them and their lives and their health and their well-being and this biosphere that we depend on for all of us to survive. So what I hope we can see is that we recognize the importance of action to protect the health of youth and children on this issue, and we have to very seriously ask ourselves, are we doing enough? Are we moving in the right direction on the greatest health issue in our existence as a species? And can we put the same urgency and the same nonpartisan agreement on that issue as we're putting into this issue? And so, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to once again bring these together. I do commend the government. I commend the opposition. I am glad that we are approaching this in solidarity as legislators. I'm glad that we are doing this work, and I look forward to seeing the results. But I hope that we can recognize that if we want to take the health of children seriously, the greatest challenge in front of us is to act on climate change. Thank you.